Hi there. In this screencast, I'll use my File Explorer application in Windows to create my file structure for my web page or my web application. So right now I'm in my documents. That's generally where I put all of my documents because it's easy to back up. So it's in Library Documents. You'll see that I have a folder here called Websites. I'm going to create another one called Websites 2, so it's empty so you can see what I'm all doing. So I'll create a new folder. And you can use Mac as well. They've got their Finder application instead of Windows Explorer. So I'll call this Websites. So this would contain all of the websites I work on, ideally. So I'll press Enter on my keyboard to finish off my naming of it, and I can double click or just press Enter now that it's highlighted. And this folder is empty. So now what I want to do is create an index.html document. I also want to create an images folder alongside that index.html document. And I also want to create a CSS folder called CSS. Within that folder, I'm going to create a CSS document called screen. Within my images folder, I would place all of the images that I'm using for my site. If you have a lot of images, you may want to create folders within the images folder to categorize all of your images. You may have images for structure or images for particular pages. So you may want a second set of folders within that images directory. So a quick way to create that index.html in Windows is just to right click, choose new text document. That creates a new text document in this location, and I'll call it index.html. Notice I'm using all lowercase, which is my personal convention for naming all of the files. You'll see that that's transferable. Most people use all lowercase for their file names. Because I removed that TXT, I got this alert, and yes, I do want to keep that HTML. And notice that it's associated with Google Chrome on my computer. So whatever your default browser is, the icon will pop up there. So that's my index.html. Again, I'm going to create a folder called images alongside that. So inside of this Websites 2 folder. For your own websites, you may want to create a folder called your name and place that index file in there. So I'm just going to right click, or I can choose new folder. I'm going to use that because it's a little bit more obvious instead of right clicking. So I'm going to say images, and again I would put all of the images that I use for my website in that folder. And this is a very common file name for your images. You'll see most people when they create web pages, they'll have all of their images inside of an images folder. And I'll create another folder called CSS. Now inside of that, I'm going to create a CSS document called screen.css. So now inside of Websites 2, inside of CSS, I can right click, choose new, and text document, and I'll call this screen.css, and I'll just delete the rest of those characters. I'll get that same alert when I press enter on my keyboard. And notice that's associated, for me, it's associated with Dreamweaver because I generally use Dreamweaver to modify my CSS. It's a great CSS editor. I mean, there's hundreds of them, but it's a good one as well. So you'll see inside of my Websites 2 folder, I've got index, images, and CSS. Now I'm just going to go one step further, and I'm going to actually create a structure much like this, but I'm going to use my file management system on my actual website. So it's great to create websites locally and then upload them to a web server, but these days we have the tools so we can actually work with this stuff right directly on our web server without having to upload stuff. So I'm just going to fire up my Cpanel. Let me just pause this, and then I'll open it up in a browser, logged in. I'll explain what the heck is going on once I'm at that point. Alright, so right now I'm in a place called Cpanel. Now I'm using a host called Green Geeks, and they just use a very common control panel system. You'll see this on many web hosts. This is the way that we manipulate or administer all of the back-end portion and the front-end portion of our websites. So you'll see I have something called a file manager here. So the reason I'm switching to this is because I was showing you Windows previously. I don't actually have a Mac to show you what I've just done on Windows, but if you have your own web server, which I do advocate you get, you can just use your file manager from Cpanel. I'm using Green Geeks, by the way, and they're my favorite. Great customer support. So presently you see this is my home, and everything will be stored in public HTML. By the way, Tanya talks a little bit about this, but she says we don't go into depth with that, but this will be an opportunity to take a look at that stuff. So in order to publish anything and share it via the web, it has to be inside of public HTML. And you see I have a whole bunch of folders in there for a lot of courses I teach, as well as different projects I've worked on. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did on the desktop and create a folder called Websites 2. So if I click right on public HTML right here, it shows me what's in there, and I can create a new folder. There's my plus folder, and I'm going to call it exactly what I called it previously. So this is a brand new folder that I'm creating. Has no relation to the one I created before. I could actually just upload the files into it, but I want to show you how we can do this right on the server. So there's Websites 2, so I'll click on that. It's empty presently. So I'm going to say new file, just like right-clicking and saying new file. The file name is going to be index.html, and I'll create the new file. There we go. Now I'm going to create a new folder. I'll call this images. Create new folder. Shows me where it's going to be. Beautiful, right? And then one more new folder called CSS. I'm going to go inside of that CSS, and I'm going to create a new file called screen.css. You see, where are we here? Websites 2, if I click on my little plus sign, you can see CSS, images. CSS is bolded, showing me screen CSS. If I click on images, there's nothing in there. If I click on Websites 2, there's my index. So exactly the same folder structure that I created on the desktop, but I can quickly create it right using my control panel file manager on my host. Now, let me just quickly show you one additional thing. This may be a little bit over your head. You can stop watching if you like. You won't be quizzed on this or anything like that. But if I click on that index.html, notice I have an HTML editor right here in my file manager. Or I can use edit right here. So I'm just going to use this edit. There's two different ways. This is a little bit straightforward for me. I'm just going to quickly, that's fine. I'm going to just quickly add all the code I need for my HTML document. So we don't even need to use a text editor. Oops, don't need that. 2 lines. I'll just call this Hello World. And I'll throw in a body. And I'll say inside of an h1 tag, Hello World. So there's my very first web page. Now, let's just quickly view this. So I'll save my changes. I'll go to, remember this is called Websites 2. I'll go to my URL, go to Websites 2. There we are. So again, the point is you can create your whole application structure on your desktop using the file management system, Finder on Mac, Windows Explorer on Windows. You create your index file and then 2 folders alongside, images and CSS. Put any CSS files inside of your CSS directory or folder, and any images you need inside of your images folder. And again, if you've already got a web host, again, you should probably get one for yourself. 000 Web Host, by the way, gives you free hosting. They have a cPanel exactly like, or I shouldn't say exactly, but very similar to what I just showed you. Thanks so much for watching.